Congressman Michael McCaul, chair of the Homeland Security Committee, and Adam Schiff, top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. I want to start with you, Chairman McCaul, and I want to go back to this Colorado shooting. Planned Parenthood is calling it domestic terrorism and saying extremists are feeding that environment. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, it's a tragedy. We're seeing too many of these shootings. It seems like every week. I think, a mental health crisis. I don't think it would fall under quite the definition of domestic terrorism, though I'll leave that to the Justice Department to make that determination. But I do think we have to address mental health, and I think we also need to enforce existing law, which requires, if you've been adjudicated mentally deficient, that you have to be put on the list so you can't purchase a firearm. And what we found when I met with the New York Police Department is so many of these cases, like the Navy Yard shooter, never made it into the system. And I think that needs to be fixed. And
do you think that will help, Congressman Schiff, that list? How do you draw the line on mental problems?
Well, I think this is a big issue, that there's too ready access of people who are seriously mentally ill to firearms. But, Martha, nothing we have done has worked because essentially we have done nothing. The background checks are not universal, so even if people who are mentally ill would be barred, if they buy it off the back of a truck or they buy it at a gun show, it's not going to stop them from getting a weapon. If they can still have access to very powerful weapons with extended ammunition clips, they're still going to be able to kill a lot of people. We have to do something other than this routine, now pantomime of condolence every time we have a mass shooting. That is simply not enough, and it's just unendurable.
And I want to move to Paris and the mass shooting there. They have somewhat lifted the imminent threat in Brussels. I was there. You feel very safe when the city's on lockdown, but they can't continue that. What do you know now of the imminent threat in Brussels, in that area?
I think the imminent threat is still very real, very present. There are a lot of people who are unaccounted for that pose a grave danger to people in both Belgium and France. And I think the reality is, until Europe makes the decision to share information, to create a unified watch list, much like we have in this country, they either have to do that or they have to stop the free flow of people across their borders and within their borders. Or it's not going to be a question of if there'll be another Paris-style attack, only when.
Chairman McCaul, what lessons have we learned from the attacks in Paris?
Well, there are several. The Paris attack, it's foreign fighters traveling to the region, coming back. So we have 5,000 Europeans with Western passports that have traveled to the region. Many have come back. We have hundreds of Americans, and many of them have come back to the United States. I do think the threat is far greater in Europe because of the numbers. There are far more foreign fighters traveling in and out of Europe to Iraq and Syria. My committee issued a bipartisan task force report that the Speaker and the leader now are implementing the recommendations into legislation to help tighten up security gaps, both internationally and domestic. I think, as Adam talked about, the ease of travel. They don't check their citizens' pass watch lists. I think a lot of that's going to change in the wake of the Paris attacks.
And what about here in the homeland, Chairman McCaul? What do we really have to do? You can't protect all these soft targets.
Well, it's very difficult, and we don't want these foreign fighters coming into the United States from visa waiver countries. We've had in the homeland 18 plots stopped. They're ISIS-related. We've arrested 70 ISIS followers. We have 1,000 investigations in all 50 states. I'll tell you one thing Congress can do is we have an appropriations bill coming up in about 2 weeks, and I think the FBI and components of Homeland Security will need an increase in funding to help combat this threat that we see right in our homeland.
Is that the answer, Congressman Schiff?
Well, you know, we certainly have resource challenges, but we are fortunate that we don't have anywhere near the number of foreign fighters to track that Europe does. At the same time, I think two areas where we can really beef up our own security. One is a continuing vulnerability at our airports. So all too often when we test the TSA, they don't meet the test, and that has to...
And that was one of the things I was going to bring up, if we can talk about this quickly. Shooting down of the Russian passenger jet, or not shooting down, the explosion on board that we blame on ISIS. That is pretty incredible, and we haven't talked about that a lot.
It is incredible, and if you look at the device that ISIS claims to have used, it's no larger than the size of a soda can. That can bring down an entire plane.
And you believe that's accurate?
I believe that a device that small can bring down an aircraft, and that means we really have to tighten up our defenses. And the other area I would mention, too, is while some have put a lot of focus on the refugees, by and large the refugees have not been the problem. The real vulnerability here is people with European passports, European citizens that can travel without a visa to the United States, and we're going to have to address that issue.
Thank you very much for